just like that, right? So whatever non-disclosures exist on currently pending or officiated legislation or litigation need to be retracted so that they can be used in criminal investigations that may impact aircraft or transportation related safety. For the second question, a number of charges need to be addressed regarding the Federal Trade Commission specifically, including a revision of related processes concerning the Office of Foreign Asset Control, as well as revisions regarding swap and derivative agreement policy. Identity theft should not merely be a matter regarding trade, but should also prepare and account for other related areas, including credit manipulation, as well as healthcare access or intercession with the criminal justice system. For the third question, for the other question, see, this is the way it happened, is that there was a disaggregation and a resequencing, which is part of what needs to be addressed. So that's why I'm not going to try to do this over. Okay, this is one of the things that happens frequently. I personally was used as a human test subject in the guidance system for aircrafts. And because there's been a mischaracterization of me specifically, there are these moments of sabotage that somebody else has identified as a vulnerability that allow for a break in what should otherwise be the transactional sequence that's actually financing the event. And it's moments like these breaks, that can allow for a kind of rupture that actually materializes into an actual explosion. As a matter of fact, that happened today. It happened today within the Dallas-Fort Worth area. This has been happening for years, and so it has to be addressed and acknowledged as such. I know I'm not the only person this has happened to, but it's also important to acknowledge what it is that happens. You're trying to do something, and you've been encoded or you've been put into a program regimen that has already determined that at specific points, when you are vibrating at a specific frequency, then you are to be targeted with a burst of energy. And that burst of energy can actually terminate or cut off the transactional process, either through no fault of your own or through some sort of electromagnetic interference. It's exactly what happened regarding that plane in Brazil. It's exactly what happened regarding that plane in Ethiopia. It's exactly what happened regarding that plane in Iran. But the question is, under what circumstances and under what auspices did that process actually get put into effect to allow for that possibility? And why has no one addressed it in all this time? That's what I mean when I say that it's important to acknowledge if there's been a resequencing, to acknowledge it and to be able to address what the implications could be, which is why I'm going to go back to what was actually the second question, but is now being presented in the third position, which has to do with options regarding wellness and healthcare. It is important that people have options for addressing their healthcare and wellness needs that do not require them to receive some sort of governmental intervention in their body or some sort of institutionalization of their healthcare needs. I believe this is necessary not only to respect people's personal, spiritual, and or political decisions around their wellness and healthcare, but it's also better for healthcare overall. One of the things we need to do is be honest about the capacity to financialize or to be compensated for our contributions of biodata or biologics in the medical sector, which includes full informed consent for our participation in any R&D, including as follow-up years later after the product has been developed and been determined for either a recalibration or a reassignment to a different sector. And we should be actually compensated for the contributions we make to the medical sector if and when we decide to engage it. And if we did that, we would be able to adequately address healthcare costs in a much more meaningful manner. Not only that, but we would be able to prevent acts of insurance fraud specific to the medical sector and acts of other kinds of fraud, including insurance fraud, regarding how the medical insurance sector is allowed to engage in acts of fraud related to other insurance sectors. Finally, in terms of this consideration around biological data and compensation for biological data, we also need to crack down on the misuse of healthcare and understandings of something being characterized as being about healthcare when it's actually about other areas. And part of the ways that we need to do this is to have more disclosure demanded of any sort of engagement with or by nanotechnology in any sort of biomedical device or biomedical process. It's important that this not be allowed to be relegated to the realm of some sort of proprietary secret. If in fact they are using, or anyone is using, technological development in order to try to alter people's actual biological beings or biophysiology. And in the process of doing that, we can have conscious engagement with this technology so that we can be able to correct for it as necessary. And in consideration of that, it's important to revise our policies around mandated vaccinations and immunizations to be in accordance with considerations regarding the use of antibiotics and other antibacterial medications that lose their potency and effectiveness with misuse or overprescription or overuse. Those things should be evaluated comparatively. And if we were to do that, I believe we would be able to take a lot of the misrepresentation regarding immunizations and vaccinations out of the discussion, because we would be having it on a more comprehensive and mature level. And we would also be able to get to the core of concerns that many people in the medical sector that are medical professionals, including people that are whistleblowers in the medical sector, are trying to bring attention to regarding patenting of research techniques and or people's biological data. I think that's a very important question, and I take it very seriously. When it comes to hackathons, I think that hackathons need to be addressed in line with other academic scenarios, including research and development used for projects that claim other people's intangible property under the auspices of research. The industrialization of higher education without appropriate accountability also needs to be addressed in accordance with the abuse of student capabilities and contributions. This abuse can take place by the professors, can also take place by the departments and the institutions overall. These things can have long-term implications in an individual's pursuit of higher education, and I believe is also potentially misabused in efforts to later on try to compel people to do things that were not a part of what they desired to do and is misrepresentative of what they actually did. This concept of academic siphoning or academic piracy that plays into this kind of institutionalization of the tenuring system and the system for seniority around academia, specifically to sectors that require some kind of research demonstrating the success of a particular kind of theoretical model or a particular experimental regime in order to qualify for the educational credentials, as a possibility of being very exploitative of a lot of our creative genius, and also entrenching people into processes they ordinarily would not want to be a part of. As we engage more and more with technology, we have to be able to acknowledge where refusal to acknowledge source origin for certain kinds of information prevents us from being able to take appropriate corrective measures when we need to later on. And so part of the way we need to do that is we need to we need to crack down on the abuse within the academic realms under the auspices of research for that kind of exploitation of people that are in the processes of developing their genius and their expertise. We also have to understand that in the United States, as far as I know, the Mansfield Amendment is still in effect. That means that unless you have prior informed consent, you are not allowed to use somebody's research for military research and development. I think that should be expanded to include the biotechnology sector, including any biotech that might have to do with genetic engineering or gene editing specifically, and also include any third parties that contract with or through the Department of Defense, i.e., you can't get a grant from a company and then they say they have access to your research, and then they're going to take that access they had to your research through their private company and use it for a contract they have with the Department of Defense. I believe a lot of civilian Academic data has actually been expropriated that way and has been allowed to be covered by auspices that it is military research and development when it is in fact being misappropriated in manners that are not accounted for. One of the ways we can address that is by making sure we adhere to and apply the standards of laws that already exist, like the Mansfield Amendment and other laws around protecting academic information.